Thanks to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring this video. Hey friends, Theros Beyond Death is finally upon us in full swing, and now that many of you had the chance to either play with the set at your pre-releases last weekend or jam some games online, I thought I'd go over my top 5 overrated and underrated limited cards of the set. Now, Constructed is another beast entirely, and I'll try to bring my top 5 overrated and underrated constructed cards in another video, but this one is going to specifically focus on draft and sealed. Without further ado, my number 5 overrated card of the set for limited, Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Look, I get it, this card is really cool, great design, nice reprint, but it doesn't mean it's the best card ever. Maybe it's the fact that it's become somewhat personalized. Everybody calls it Gary, of course. Grey Merchant, Gary, easy transition there, but it isn't a bomb that wins the game every single time. The Merchant can support a heavy black deck rather well in the limited environment, of course, but people really need to stop freaking out about it. Plenty of other great black cards. Grey Merchant, makes a black deck really nice, of course, but overrated for sure. So number 5, Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Number 4, Nessian Boar. Another highly contentious card. The Boar has a bunch of things going on for it, that people believe makes it a bomb or somehow a one-sided wrath effect that's going to kill all of your opponent's creatures. But I think the card is decent, don't get me wrong, but I believe the problem with this card is that it's not utilized correctly and is just randomly thrown into, green decks without any other thought, and then people end up attacking with it, thinking that it's going to eat all of their opponent's creatures, but then their opponent ends up drawing, 3 cards, 4 cards, and just has all the answers in the world anyways. So with this card, you really need to choose your spot carefully and make sure you have ways to really utilize it and maximize its efficiency in combat. But Nessian Boar, I think, is a card that is super highly overrated right now. Again, doesn't mean it's a bad card, just very, very overrated at number 4. Number 3, Thirst for Meaning. Now, on paper, this seems like a card that, would do good things, but more often than not, this isn't the card draw that it seems to be. Yes, it's an instant, and there are a ton of enchantments in the format that, you can discard to it, but oftentimes what I've found in this format is that you draw 3 cards and then you just end up discarding, 2 lands or 2 non-enchantment cards anyways. So I wouldn't take Thirst for Meaning very highly in a draft, and while you're probably going to always play it in your sealed games if you're playing blue, it's not really the card draw all-star that it looked like when the set was first put out there. So Thirst for Meaning, definitely overrated. Number 3. My number 2 most overrated limited card of the set is Heliod's Punishment. Now, initially this card looks like a pacifism or whatever, right? You just cast on your opponent's creature and it's dead forever. Well, that's not entirely the case. While an aggressive deck can try and push through before the counters on the punishment wear off, you have to remember, if you enchant a creature that isn't summoning sick, your opponent can immediately tap the creature to remove a counter. Often enough, this format turns into a bit of a grind, so playing a removal spell that can be removed with just, enough turns isn't exactly where you want to be. So playable for sure, but I don't think it's like a super high pick or anything. It's not a true pacifism. It's not a true arrest type effect. And of course, it gets hit by all the enchantment removal in the format, so you can lead yourself to some blowouts, or if you just don't kill your opponent fast enough, they get their creature back anyways. So number 2 most overrated card, Heliod's Punishment. And the number 1 most overrated card, in my opinion, for limited in this set is Hydra's Growth, another enchantment. It's not that this card is bad. Again, it's playable just like a lot of these other overrated cards, but people tend to think that this is some huge bomb enchantment that is going to win them the game every single time, and it's not true. That's not what's going to happen. Hydra's Growth can put in a lot of work, but those scenarios require a few different things to happen, and it still gives the opponent multiple turns to find an answer, right? The turn you cast it, sure, the creature gets a 1/1 counter, and then it gets 2 1/1 counters, total after that. But between the plethora of regular removal for enchantments, and how it requires a creature to stick on the battlefield initially, all leads me to believe that this card is super overrated. And again, while playable, just not a card that is going to win the game every single time. And here's what I believe to be the top 5 overrated cards for limited. Number 5, Grey Merchant of Asphodel. Number 4, Nessian Boar. Number 3, Thirst for Meaning. Number 2, Heliod's Punishment. And number 1, Hydra's Growth. Now let's go over the top 5 underrated cards in Theros Beyond Death for limited. Jump right in with number 5, Iroas's Blessing. And perhaps this is just personal experience, but I've noticed the Blessing severely underdrafted. Unlike something like Hydra's Growth, where the immediate impact is negligible, the Blessing usually kills an opposing creature when it's cast. Obviously, you still leave yourself open to potentially getting your creature killed in response, but if you pick and choose your situations, then this is a great card for any limited deck, and a card that I can definitely see splashing for as well, right? It's 1 red and 3 colorless, so not hard to splash. The fact that you get to usually kill a creature immediately, and it also buffs your creature. Add to the fact that it combos with something like Flicker of Fate really well, and you have a really, really good card. I don't think this card should be going as late as it has been in draft, and certainly a really good card for sealed. Number 4 underrated card of the set, Mogus's Favor. And initially this card seemed heavily unimpressive, to me even as well, but the more the format is played out, the better this card has become. Not only can you snipe 1 toughness creatures immediately, but you can also finish off a large creature that's already taken damage, or even use it to buff one of your own creatures, on offense. Add to the fact that you can escape this card for multiple uses, and it suddenly becomes clear why this card is so much better than it initially looks. And I think that's true of a lot of the escape cards, not just Mogus's Favor, although I think this card is more underrated as far as escape card are concerned, just because it doesn't look good on the surface of things. But again, the fact that you can just continuously use it and use it to buff a creature, to kill a creature, just makes it, pretty powerful actually. So number 4 underrated card, Mogus's Favor. Number 3 underrated card in the set, I think, is Chainweb Arachneer. Similar to Mogus's Favor, this is another 1-drop that plays out much better than initially looks. It can block or even trade with something early on, and then becomes a really relevant threat later in the game if it has been escaped. And even if it's not escaped, right, it still is a creature that can come back later on. Add to the fact that you can snipe off small flyers in the process, and you can see how this little 1-drop can be so powerful. Like, there are a decent number of flyers in this set, and this is not a true fight effect. So even though it sometimes would be better if the Arachneer could fight instead of just dealing damage, as then you could, kill your own Arachneer and then put it in the graveyard and then have it come back bigger later on. The fact that when it does come back escaped, it just usually kills a flyer is great. Plus it has reach, right? So if you don't get to kill a flyer, maybe your opponent plays a flyer later on and you can see it just brick walls them. Also, it attacks for 4. My number 2 most underrated card of the set is the Entrancing Liar. In my opinion, this is the best removal spell in the format. People don't often realize that you can just permanently get rid of one of your opposing creatures, and then should the opponent play something even better, you can untap it and then Liar that creature instead. It gets around, any removal that simply targets enchantments, and can even be used offensively, right? You can tap down an opposing creature on their turn, untap it on your turn, and then tap another creature, and get in, by tapping down 2 creatures effectively. I'd be a liar if I said this card wasn't great. I think Entrancing Liar is a very, very high pickup in draft, and you should always play it in your sealed decks. The number 1 most underrated card in this set for limited, in my opinion, is the Nessian Wanderer. Fairly innocuous looking at first, but this is one of the best 2-drops, if not the best 2-drop in Theros Beyond Death. The fact that it comes down so early at only 2 mana, then continuously draws you lands from then on out, makes this card downright busted. Plenty of enchantments in the format to trigger the Constellation. It helps ensure you make your land drop every turn, but also has the added upside, of making sure you draw plenty of action after the fact because you've drawn so many lands from your deck. Even if this only activated once, it would be worth playing, but I would play this card every single time in my green decks. I would take it pretty highly in draft. This card just does everything you want out of 2-drop and more. Really, really busted. Nessian Wanderer, number 1 most underrated card. Once again, here are my top 5 underrated cards from Theros Beyond Death. Number 5, Iroas's Blessing. Number 4, Mogus's Favor. Number 3, Chainweb Arachneer. Number 2, Entrancing Liar. And number 1, Nessian Wanderer. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and we'll have some more coming out in the future.